Welcome to the Stone Carvers Guild Podcast. Here you will meet a variety of carvers working throughout North America. Drawing on our collective experience, we seek to share knowledge about this ancient art and to do our part to ensure that stone carving will play an important role in built environments for generations to come. So whether you are an experienced carver, new to the craft, or just curious, put on your safety goggles, open up your mind, and welcome to the workshop.
I'm Matt Johnson.
I'm Bethany Lee.
And I'm Joel Norwood. Welcome, everybody, once again.
Here we are. We're back.
And a really great episode today. Just going to say that to start it off.
I am really looking forward to talking to Patrick. So I have this really, when I joined the Stone Carvers Guild, I was technically a founding member, but I was very young. And I had this just really fond memory of sitting at a bar with Patrick, and we were sharing a pint, and I don't even remember what we were talking about, but he was just so welcoming and encouraging of me as a young stone carver, and it's just a very fond memory that I have. I don't remember any of the details other than just he was wearing this white hat and and he's got this beautiful accent and just a way of speaking that's just super encouraging. And as a young carver, it was really special to me to hear him, just encourage me to be, to find my path. And that was really nice. So I'm looking forward to talking to him about that. Not about that.
He seems like a very generous person.
He is.
Yeah.
He's just a solid heart. Just a very solid heart.
Yeah.
So how are you guys doing? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to immediately launch into memory lane.
It was touching. That was touching. Well, I'm good. How are you, Bethany?
Good. I'm sitting in my warehouse right now, and hopefully no trains will go by or any other loud noises.
So you're back. You're back from Ohio.
Yes, back from Ohio.
How was that? Was that
Ohio was good.
Good answer. Good answer. Somebody from Ohio. That's your first-time listener.
I learned a ton, and it's interesting talking to Patrick Plunkett because I was in Ohio with Nick Fairplay, and he's English, obviously, also. And Nick Fairplay also basically was formed in the cathedral sort of workshop system. Mm-hmm. And so I learned a lot from Nick Fairplay about direct carving and carving by hand and doing Gothic motifs, basically. And
what do you mean when you say direct carving?
Oh, I mean, as in draw on the stone, go straight at the stone, like not have a model.
No model.
Kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. But I thought I'd already told you guys about the spandrels. I was doing spandrels. Mm-hmm. Matthew was doing spandrels. Didn't we have a spandrel conversation?
I'm still doing
already?
spandrels.
You're still doing. How are
Bethany has moved on with the spandrels. Matthew's still there.
And how are your spandrels?
My spandrels have been very well received. So that's as good as you can hope for, right? The client is super happy. They are changing the face of this building from kind of vanilla to rocky road, something a little bit more exciting and delicious. And, so I'm happy with the spandrels.
I think it's really funny that like the pneumatic carver over here is still on the spandrels, and Bethany, the hand carver, has moved on. And yes, I am still trying to stoke the rumble in the jungle.
But I bet were you using mallet to carve your spandrels?
Yep, it was all just chisel and mallet.
From a flat surface?
Yep.
I guess I'm just lazy. I think I might be.
Well, okay, but we haven't talked about quantity and size, so it's probably comparing apples and oranges. And also, Joel has not weighed in on this particular controversy. We do not know what he has.
Is Joel?
Well, I'm a letter cutter, so I'm just sort of like in a different world. Yeah, I use pneumatic things.
Pneumatic things.
Pull it out for. Well, I pull it out for the granite work and stuff like that. My trusty Trout Holden. Yeah.
So you carve granite.
I carve all kinds of things. Slate is my favorite. I love slate for letter carving because it just takes the details so nicely, and it has this instant, gratifying return of the inside color of beautiful. And then I do a little marble here and there, and then, but I'll find farm stones locally here. I've got this beautiful piece of just sort of wild granite, big block that from our farm, and not sure how it ended up there, but it's there. And so
that's awesome.
And so, what do you carve it with? You carve it with carbide chisel?
Yeah, carbide chisel. I'll start with the, kind of get the center line going with the hand work, and then I'll jump into pneumatic world to get a lot of if it's a larger letter, we're talking 6-inch foot tall letter or something like that, and then I'll do some of the fine pieces if it's like a serif, going back to the hand. So yeah, that's life in this world.
Joel, did you just say rock from your farm?
Yes. Yeah.
You have a farm?
Yeah, we do have a farm. Yep. Got a farm over here in west central Ohio.
What you grow?
A lot of rocks. I grow a lot of rocks on our land. That's pretty much what we grow. Bethany, you're going to ask something?
Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll save it for another.
Oh, podcast. Very exciting.
We should really probably talk about Patrick Plunkett, right?
We should. And you guys knew him before me here into this show. What a joy it was to learn some of these stories. But Bethany, how did you meet Patrick, Bethany?
I met Patrick several years ago. Before I belonged to the Stone Carvers Guild, I found their directory and was calling random professional members from the directory because I wanted some advice about how to move a large stone. And most people ignored me. Patrick Plunkett called me back and talked to me about how to move a stone. And I remember his advice involving tying it to a tree.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, he was very generous with his time. But he lives in one of the suburbs of DC, and I live in DC. So we're neighbors. And he's an Englishman, just like Nick Fairplay, and one of the carvers who worked on the National Cathedral, which is, I guess, a lot of our members, especially in that generation. But he grew up in England, worked at a lot of different. Worked in restoration. What he told me is that he cut his teeth doing restoration, and then came to the U.S. to work on the National Cathedral, and later worked on the White House. And currently, so he gave me some limestone for my studio, actually, to use with students. And so I actually visited his studio where he works right now, and he's got various artifacts from the National Cathedral, plus like he collects different things from the places he's worked. Anyway, he currently lives in a suburb of DC, and he has some stone working and also machining, and he rides his motorcycle. Anyway, he's got a really interesting basement yard work area.
Basement yard.
Yeah, so that's the overview, and we'll find out more when we interview him.
Wow. Hey, Bethany, are you, I don't want to dox you, but are you in Maryland, Virginia, or D.C.?
I'm in D.C.
You were
my studio is in Brentwood, Maryland, which is right over the DC line, and I live in DC.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, thank you for that introduction, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Let's get to it.
All right.
So we're with Patrick Plunkett, lifetime carver. I won't ask you how old you are, but you've been carving for a long time. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you've done work at a lot of work around Washington, D.C. in the United States, but you got your start over in England, as we can tell.
Right.
Yeah. So when did carving begin for you? When did you first?
Well, I started out as an apprentice stonecutter.
Where at?
Back in 1962. So I left school when I was 15. Kind of bummed around during the summer. And then my father said, well, son, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? So I said, I haven't really thought about it. He said, well, you better start thinking about it because we're not going to support you for the rest of your life. So he said, well, what were you good at school? Well, I wasn't very good at anything at school, but I was good at carpentry and I was good at metalwork and I was good at art. So he said, I know a foreman of a company on Portland, and they're always looking for carpenters. So how you fancy becoming a carpenter? I said, yeah, fine, So I met with a guy, and he said, if you're willing to go to building college for a year, I'll guarantee you a job when you come out. I said, great. So while you're at the college, you have to spend 2 weeks in every single building trade until you specialize in the one you're going to spend time at. So this is one of 3 colleges in England that had a masonry section. And when I got to the masonry section, I just fell in love with stone. I loved the way it worked. I loved the smell of it. I loved everything about it. So at the end of 2 weeks, I said to the head lecturer of the college, in the masonry section, I said, look, sir, I've got a bit of a problem because I promised this guy on Portland at this carpentry company that I was going to work for him. So he said, what was his name? So I told him what the guy's name was, and he said, oh, don't you worry about that. He says, I'll stop off on the way home and call in and see him to let him know you won't be working for him. He said, from now on, you're going to be a stonemason. And that's how it all got going.
And what was the name of the college?
Weymouth Technical College.
Weymouth. So is that close to where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in Weymouth. And there was a large technical college there that did all the building trades, engineering, commerce, a whole array of stuff.
And is Portland is where the Portland cement comes from, but there's also a limestone from Portland.
No,
right?
No.
Okay,
no.
Great.
Portland cement was named after Portland stone, technically. Portland is famous for its stone.
Okay.
It's almost an island about 2 miles off the coast of England, connected by a thin causeway, and it's 5 miles by 2 miles, roughly, and it's a solid big chunk of limestone. Wow. So it was made famous by Christopher Wren when he rebuilt London after the Great Fire. Because St. Paul, he got the job of designing and rebuilding St. Paul's Cathedral. And I think at this point, it was probably the 5th church built on that site. And up until then, all the churches were made of wood. And he wanted something that wouldn't burn down, so he chose Portland stone. So the majority of London is built of Portland stone.
And So I'm looking at the island right now, and it's just covered with quarries. Which of these quarries is the oldest? Like, where did they start?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure where they started. They probably started near the coast because most of the stone was shipped away in barges or sailing barges to places like London and other parts of the country.
Oh, wow.
There weren't too many roads back in those days. We're talking 16th century.
Sure.
So ship was by far the most convenient way of transportation.
Yes.
And is this limestone? Is it because it looks like from the map, it looks like you're fairly close to France. Is it similar to French limestone or?
Yes and no. It's French limestone tends to be a lot softer. Not all of it, but most of it tends to be a little softer than Portland stone.
Okay. Is Portland similar? Like I know American limestone, so is it similar to Indiana?
It's very similar to Indiana. Yeah.
Okay.
Very similar. There's I would say there's a few more shells, that type of thing, in Portland stone. But there again, like all stone, it depends which bed of stone you're working, depending on the quality and the variation of it.
It's such a small little area. It's amazing. I'd always imagined that Portland was like a region, much larger.
No, it's very small. And now I don't think they're quarrying. Most of the quarries now aren't quarries; they're mines. They're mining stone because of all the green zone restrictions.
Do you mean that they're digging underground and pulling the stone out?
Yep, just like they are in Indiana.
Wow. So these quarries that I'm seeing from a satellite view are kind of they're not as active as they used to be.
Most of those are old ones. I believe there's still an active one over on the east side of the island.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I'm seeing they're all over the place.
And most of the ones on the, I want to say, west side of the island, they're all extinct.
Wow.
Patrick, was this an appreciation for the stone? Was this one developed over time, or did you know about and have a love for the stone as you sort of also fell in love with the smell and things like that as you were talking about?
Well, my brother was a stonemason. My brother's 3 years older than me, so I basically followed in his footsteps. But it didn't have anything to do with what he was doing. It was just something that I wanted to do.
And so how did you go from...
I think Bethany's got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay, Matthew. You ask.
Well, I was just curious how you went from masonry to carving. Oh, I see you have this question.
Well, that started later because when I finished my apprenticeship, the stone industry back in 1966, when I finished, was going through a bit of a rough time because architectural styles were changing and the architects didn't want to build with stone anymore. They wanted to use glass and steel. So there was a big decline in the use of stone. And this happens through the generations. You'll find architectural ins and outs. So they wanted me to go and work on a saw. And I said, I didn't spend, 4 years learning how to cut a piece of stone to go and work on a saw. So I decided to leave. And then I called my brother up. And he was up in Nottingham, in the north of England, working for a company there that worked on banks and churches. So I asked him if they needed another stonemason up there, and they said yes. So I packed up my bag, get my bike a kick, and I was off. So I rode up to Nottingham, and I worked at this company up there, working mainly on old churches, mostly restoration work, tracery windows, pinnacles, crockets, finials, this sort of thing. So that's where I got my start in sort of basic carving, doing crockets and restoration work. That's where it all started.
Nick Fairplay was talking about when he got started that like crockets were one of his early tasks.
Yeah.
Is that common amongst carvers in England?
Yeah, because every church you work on, it's got finials with crockets on it, and 9 times out of 10, it's always the frilly stuff that goes first. So that's quite often one of the jobs that gets taken on is recarving and cutting a finial and setting it again.
Plus,
would you explain what a crocket is?
A crocket is an architectural detail on the corner of a pinnacle, a spire. Basically, what they do is they throw the water away from the structure, like most architectural details. What you don't want to do, you don't want water running down the wall. Otherwise, it tends to cause problems after a while. So there are all these secret little details like grotesques and gargoyles and all sorts of stuff. String courses, label molds, they're all there. They're all there for a good reason.
So you got your start in stonemasonry, and then you went to Nottingham and you did some carving. And you had said to me that before that you had cut your teeth doing restoration work. And I don't know if we want to go chronologically or not, but do you want to talk about the restoration at the White House? I think that would be really interesting for our listeners to hear.
When I was at the cathedral, the Washington National Cathedral, the master carver there, Vincent Palumbo, was offered a job part-time at restoring some of the stonework on the White House in Washington, D.C. And Vincent Palumbo was a brilliant stone carver, but he had no experience in restoration work. So he asked me and another carver, Bill Booker, if we would like to go down to the White House and do some work down there. So I said, yeah, sure. So it was basically weekend work. And then as it got more involved, we would take a week or two off at vacation time and work down there. And first of all, it started out as all the detail at the north entrance to the White House. That's the side that faces Pennsylvania Avenue. So there were bits of stone missing on the swag over the doorway. Mostly cleaning up and recarving or in putting Dutchman in and recarving the detail work around the doorway. And then there was a couple of, I want to say, heavily molded stones that had to be replaced. And then later on, he was asked if he would like to get a team together and restore the whole exterior of the White House. And he said yes. So I joined him I want to say a couple of years later, I'm going to say 1989, 1990, when I first went down there full time, when the cathedral was officially finished and they didn't need me anymore. So I went down there to take charge of some of the sections of that.
And so what was wrong with the White House that it needed restoring?
Well, they had called in a painting company to clean off the paint and repaint it. Well, during the cleaning process, they found out that there were 40 coats of paint on the White House. So there's every coat of paint known to man was on the White House. So the problem was that because the paint was so thick, it was now causing more problems than it was serving. So
what does paint do to stone?
Paint was, in fact, falling away, deteriorating. So they found out when they took the paint right off, which was crumbling behind the paint, that it really needed serious investigation. So that's when they called us in to decide what was going to need to be done, and it was like whole entablature courses of stone needed to be replaced.
Well, so paint, so it adheres to the stone, and then as it fails, it starts to pull the stone off. Is that what happens?
Well, after they had cleaned all the paint off and the stone was dry, we went up there and did a detailed survey of every single stone in the area, and made a plan of what needed to come out and what was going to stay. They purchased a saw from the UK and built a saw shed in a Park Service depot, and there we had access to the local stone, Aquia Creek sandstone, that originally was used on the Capitol building. But when they did the restoration of the Capitol way back when, the stone that they took off, they stored at a facility where we were allowed access to it. So, because the old quarry at Aquia Creek, which was the original freestone in its day, has long since been closed. So this stone for the U.S. Capitol was what we got to use to restore the White House.
Wow.
So was that the original stone that the White House was built with, or was that just a good match?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so
does that quarry
Pardon?
still exist? Does that quarry still exist?
No, it doesn't. It's still there. I believe you can go and visit it. It's in Virginia. And it's one of the most interesting quarries, old quarries, you can probably ever get to visit, because they quarried it basically like the Egyptians quarried stone. And you can still see areas where they had quarried up the side, dug big channels up the side, and then a big channel wide enough for a man to stand with a pick all the way around the back, and then they drove wedges in the front, and then they split the piece up.
Wow.
So it's most interesting. I would recommend anyone to go there.
Why did they do it like that? Do you know?
Because that was the age we were living in, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
They were living in.
That was high tech.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I believe most of the stone cutters at the day to build the White House were Scottish. Whether or not there were any Scottish quarriers, I don't know.
Most of the stone carvers and cutters that worked on the Texas Capitol are also from Aberdeen because
really, wow,
yeah, because in Texas, like we have this really intensely hard granite, but nobody in Texas knows how to work it.
Yeah, well,
so we had to bring in these Aberdeen, a crew of 30 Scottish from Aberdeen.
That's right, because if you go to Aberdeen, all the buildings in Aberdeen are famous for their red sands, or their red granite.
Yeah, and at the time, like Aberdeen was it was the center of granite, the granite world. It was a big deal globally.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have a question. Then, sort of, we're talking about the relationship of overseas, what I call overseas, to the United States here, and talking about your work on the White House. Well, how did you get from the UK to United States?
He came over to work on the Texas Capitol.
Okay. Answered. Yeah. Solved.
Sorry, Patrick.
Cool, I guess. So I was working at Salisbury Cathedral in the cloisters, repairing one of the bays of the tracery in the cloisters. And the powers to be at the time wanted us to do a public relations setup where, rather than work the stone in the shop, we would work it in the cloisters so the tourists could see us and ask us questions. And I said, well, that's all very well, but we're not going to get much done. And he said, well, do what you can. So it just so happens that one day there was a group of choir boys visiting from St. Albans School in Washington, and they told me about the Washington Cathedral, which I knew nothing about at the time. And I had a friend, an English friend, that was living in Vancouver. And I thought at the time, without giving it a second thought, he was talking about Washington on the West Coast. So I thought, oh, that'll be great, because if I get a job there, I can go and see my mate who's living in Vancouver. Well, it didn't work out like that, did it? Anyway, so when I found out where this place was, I thought, anyway, I'll write a letter to the clerk of works, asking him if he needs any stonemasons. So he replied quite soon and said, well, we're not looking for any stone cutters, he said, but stonemasons, but we are looking for stone carvers. And he said, have you done any stone carving? And I said, yes, I've done some stone carving. And he said, well, I'm coming over to Europe next month, and I can stop off at Salisbury, and if you could show me some of your work, I would be very, very pleased. So he said, yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. Well, I didn't have any work to show. All my work is 300 or 400 feet up in it on the cathedral. So I thought, I know, I'll bring a bunch of stone in from outside and I'll knock up a few grotesques for him, see if he likes that. So I knocked up I don't know, must have been half a dozen grotesques of different shapes and sizes, and I laid them all up just inside the door of the workshop. So when he came in, he could see him right away. So he turned up on a Saturday, and I met him down at the workshop. And he was staying with his wife at the Rose and Crown pub, right on the River Avon in Salisbury, a beautiful spot, So it wasn't far for him to walk up to the back of the workshop. So he opened the door and he walked in and he goes, now that's the sort of thing I'm looking for, he goes. And I said to myself, gee, I didn't think it was going to be that easy.
Easy job interview.
So that was the easy part. The difficult part was getting all the official paperwork to get into the country. So it meant going backwards and forwards to the American Embassy in London with various bits of paper and the sort of thing. And then getting signatures and then sending it back to Washington, and then one thing led to another. So they said, okay, you are clear to go, but the problem is that the Department of Labor has to sign off on it. So you can't just to prove that you're not taking away a job that an American worker can do. That's basically what it boils down to. But the problem was that the people in that department of government weren't talking to the office in Washington Cathedral. The two were not communicating. And so this was a holdup. So once certain people at the cathedral found out about it, certain phone calls were made and everything was put right. Then I received my okay to say that your flight had been booked and we'll expect you over the beginning of the month type of thing. So that was in May of 75. So I came over in May of 75. And the first thing that hit me like a brick was the humidity. I'd never experienced that type of weather condition before.
Is there anything?
That was really tough.
Is there anywhere in England that's like that?
No.
That's
nowhere.
humid like that?
No. You've got to remember the height of the summer in England, it only got to like about 78.
Yeah. Had you been to Spain?
Nope. No, I hadn't traveled that. I had been to Turkey, but it was nowhere near that bad there.
Not like Washington D.C.
No.
Had you been to the United States before that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Was the appeal of the United States just the job, or was there also the job.
I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was the thought of working on something that was new. You got to remember, I spent all my life working on buildings that were 1,200 years old.
Right.
Right. Medieval structures, old churches, old cathedrals. And I thought, working on a new cathedral, man, this is really the cat's whiskers,
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah, we don't have anything 1,200 years old over here. That's
right. Can you tell us about what you made at the National Cathedral?
What I made? Well, I did what I was told to do. I never made anything. I carved hundreds of square flowers. That's what I did first of all.
Was Palumbo in charge, or who was in charge at the time? Was it?
Pardon?
Was it Roger?
Roger Marie.
Who was it? Was he in charge, or was it Vincent?
Yeah. Well, Roger was in charge when I got there.
Okay.
So it was square flowers, and then it was the occasional grotesque. But it was and finials. Hundreds and hundreds of finials.
You did it, the most famous gargoyle.
The
National on the National Cathedral.
Yeah.
Was that where did
Vader?
What's the story of that?
Oh, so the story of that was there was a children's National Geographic children's magazine. They ran a competition. And first, I think it was like a first and second prize. So there were 2 stones to carve. And Vincent, the master carver, Mr. Palumbo, he got he got to do the first one, and it was a girl holding an umbrella. And the second one was Darth Vader. So he gave me the model of Darth Vader. Now, you've got to remember, nearly everything at the cathedral was done via a sculptor's model. So it was either a one-to-one using a pointer machine, or you had a model and you basically did it with a pair of calipers and by eye, right? So Darth Vader was by eye.
Were you working from like an action figure?
No, you're working from a sculptor's model.
Oh, okay. It was a clay model.
No, it was a plaster model.
Okay.
All the models are normally plaster. So about halfway through the carving, when I got to round about the top of the head area, it looked like the sculptor had like stuck the back of his hand in the clay and made a big indentation, right? So I went over to the master carver and I said to him, "Hey, Fitz, you want me to carve it the way the model is, or do you want me to carve? This doesn't look right to me." And he says, "I told you to do it the way the model is." And he was like in one of his funny moods, you know. So you didn't want to sort of get on his bad side. So I just carved it the way the model was, and this indentation was in it. So I carved it into the stone. And then when it was finished, he looked at it and he said, "What the hell's this?" He said, "Well," I said, "You told me to carve it the way the model is." And I came over to check with you, and you said, "Well, you know," and that was the story.
And so is it like a thumb? Like it was like
if you take the back of your hand and you sort of press it on something, you get that type of impression. It wasn't a thumb; It was much bigger than that.
Wow.
But anyway, no one's ever going to see it from down on the ground because the only part you see is the underside.
But it doesn't catch water. It doesn't catch water.
Oh no, it's a dripstone.
Yeah, I mean the indentation of the hand.
No, because the whole thing is pointing like downhill, so everything runs off it anyway.
Got it. Huh?
Yeah, that Darth Vader grotesque has a Wikipedia entry and everything. That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's got a Facebook fan following.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So was it instantly? When was this? Was this right like 77, 78? Like, was this right when the movie came out?
I don't remember.
Because it was. I mean, it's still.
I think it was probably in the 80s at some point.
Oh, okay. Huh. What was that? What was that like? Because I mean, people immediately responded to it. It was.
Well, I guess it was because everybody knew it.
Yeah.
You know. Well, so the story goes. I don't know what part of it is true. That when Spielberg found out about it, he was somewhat upset, and he wanted them to carve it off, and they said, "Well, we can't do that," you know. So I don't know exactly what happened, but for years, you couldn't find any postcards or anything like that in the gift shop to do with Darth Vader.
Right.
And I guess over the years, it all kind of went away. What I said.
Yeah. So
kind of went away, and now you can buy models and postcards and all sorts of stuff of it, you know.
But it's kind of like, to tie it back to your desire to come over and carve on a new building. It's kind of the epitome of the new gargoyle.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it is the demon of our age.
Yeah.
In a way,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I did another grotesque that was like somebody wrapped in cinematic film. You know, and I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
I did. I mean, we did dozens of these things. In fact, we did so many grotesques. We were just given a name of the animal, and then we used to go across the road to a school where they had a big rack of National Geographic magazines, and then somebody wanted me one day to do a was it a zebra or a camel? So, you know, you went through the National Geographic to find a picture of a zebra, bring it back, and sort of get some ideas to do the carving, you know.
Oh, so you wouldn't have a model at that point?
Didn't have a model for those because there were just so many of them.
Wow. Is there still, how much work is still left? Like, I know there's a lot of bosses that are blank.
There's, I think, the south transept. I want to say south or north transept. One of the transepts, anyway, hasn't been carved.
So none of the blank
stuff. No.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you do work on those transepts where you had to basically work on your back for months?
I carved a couple of boss stones just inside the main doorway of the west front. If you look up, there's some, I think they call it the narthex. Just inside, there's some interesting ones there. I've got pictures, but not in my portfolio. She's looking at the moment.
Because something that like people might not understand is that sometimes the masons are moving much faster. Well, they're always moving much faster than the carvers. So there'll be blanks just set in the wall, and you have to carve it in situ. Then at that point,
yes, yeah, a lot of the stones. I believe some of the early gargoyles were done that way. I know some of the gargoyles on the west front were done that way. We did a whole bunch of crockets in situ on the west front. Square flower. Yeah.
That's its own set of challenges.
Absolutely.
You know, just the logistics of making sure you have all your tools so you're not having to climb up and down scaffolding.
Yeah.
Oh, and so we have a running controversy on this podcast between people who like to carve by hand and people who like pneumatic tools. So when you're like working on the cathedral and in general, are you working with pneumatic tools or are you working just with hand tools?
The debate is heated.
I don't think you get a choice. You do what you're told to do. I came to this country with a mallet and a handful of chisels, and they looked at me like, "What do you think you're up to?"
Right. We got to move. This is America.
Yeah. Come on, let's get going. So they stuck an air hammer in my hand and a chisel, and they said, "Right, get going."
Had you not held an air hammer before, or
only for the only time I ever used an air hammer was roughing out,
right?
And that's the only time and that was during my apprenticeship.
So why was so in England, why was everyone using hand tools, whereas here people were using pneumatic tools?
Well, that's America for you.
I like let's keep comparing the English and American tradition. Yeah, what's your observations?
Well, you can work stones with pneumatic tools in England, but you'll find in a lot of places, especially if you're doing restoration work, you've got to finish it by hand. You've got to make it look like there are chisel marks in it. You can't have a nice smooth piece of stone in a 600,000-year-old building. It just doesn't look right. You've got to have some continuity in it.
Wow.
Do you have a preference now? I mean, you started with one.
I grew up working by hand. I came to this country and I learned how to use air tools. Right. They both got their place. It's purely preference, but it's obviously, I think, a lot faster to do it by air tools. Work goes a lot faster. But you also there are certain side effects like carpal tunnel. Some people find that they have problems down the line. I did. I had carpal tunnel, and I basically blame it on the air tools. That's just my point of view.
Do you get that thing where your like fingers, like the tips of your fingers are like white because there's no blood in them?
That's carpal tunnel. Yep. So either that or
that's carpal tunnel.
Hey Matthew, get that checked out.
Yep.
I just swing my arm like a windmill for about, and it seems to solve that. I
get it when I'm driving. I drive on here, but the ends of my fingers go white.
Yeah. Huh.
And then they're fine for the rest of the day.
I didn't realize it was carpal tunnel.
So can I ask a question? So I'm afraid that Matt and Joel do not have the benefit of looking at all of these pictures.
Oh, I'd love to.
But there's one that I'm looking at right now it's a head. And then is this a crocket? Oh, this is a finial. Oh, okay. Anyway, can you tell us, we will post these in the show notes. Can you tell us about the head and the finial?
Well, the head, it's a grotesque me.
Okay.
It was modeled. Oh, I'm sorry.
Microphone.
Yeah. So the grotesque that Bethany is referring to is a grotesque of me, my head, with my hat on. And it was modeled by Malcolm Harlow, and it was carved by Malcolm Harlow. And it sits up on the west front of the cathedral, outside the observation gallery.
You have permission for that, or was surprise?
No, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how it came to be. Whether or not the dean came in one day, or somebody came in one day and said, "I think we should have a few of the people that worked on this place should be up there," and my name was mentioned. And I can't remember who else is up there, but yeah. So that was basically the story of that.
Is this a typical? Is this from the finial? Is the finial from the National Cathedral?
Typical. That's a typical finial. Yeah. The overall shape was cut in Indiana, and then we did some basic carving on it, and then we applied patterns to get various details, and then it was that's basically how that was done. So there was like a set of patterns for each one. There was a pattern that went up there.
Patrick, in the model or in the carving that Malcolm did you have your white hat on in that?
Oh, yeah.
So ever since I've known you, you've been wearing that white hat, and now I'm looking at a picture of you when you're young and you're wearing that white hat. What is the story of the white hat?
Oh, you really want to know?
Yes.
Well, I really know. So when I was working at Salisbury Cathedral, when I first started there, I used to come home every weekend back to Weymouth, and I used to meet my mate down at the local pub, and there was always a bit of a dance going on there. So we'd have a few beers downstairs, and then we'd go upstairs to the dance upstairs. And because Portland being a naval port, there was quite often ships of various nationalities. So one weekend, there was an American ship in, and all the sailors were upstairs on the dance floor. And some of them had just too much to drink. And I don't know, hats started to fly. And by the time that the MPs came and sort of turfed everybody out, and I looked around and I saw there was a white hat on the floor. So I picked it up and I thought, oh, that'll make a good work hat. So that's how it all got going.
Is it the same hat?
No, it's not the same hat.
You've kept the supply up, though.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
How did you find the second hat?
You could buy them in army surplus stores. Back in the day when there were army surplus stores. You can't find an army surplus store anymore now.
So do you have enough? Are you covered?
Well, the one I'm wearing now is probably the last one I'll ever need. I think the only ones you can find now are made in China.
It is a signature hat for sure.
So while we're on the subject of sort of I guess hats are not exactly carving. So just things about you. I gather that you ride motorcycles. You mentioned your bike. You rode when you were younger. Would you tell us about what role do motorcycles play in your life?
They're a very big part of my life. It's my main source of transport. Yeah, I mean, you can't get that many tools on a motorcycle, but you better make sure you have the right ones when you get to where you're going. So
you're not bringing an air compressor with you on the motorcycle?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You don't have a sidecar with an air compressor in it?
I did not. But what I did gravitate to, so I got a job in Southampton one day, and this is still in the 60s, and it was 60 miles from Weymouth. And so I used to ride my bike there early Monday morning and try and time it to when the cows have already crossed the road from one field to another. And if you didn't, then you used to get stopped by a guy with a red light. So this was, and I'm not joking, this was a major road where the cows used to cross the road at 5 o'clock in the morning.
That's fantastic.
And in the winter, where it's pitch black, you didn't want to see that. But anyway, those days are long gone, thank goodness. So one winter, I got up to this place in Southampton. I was so cold, it took me an hour before I could do anything. I mean, I was froze to the bone. So when I got home on the following Friday night, I told my father, I said, Dad, I don't know if I can keep this up, And he said, well, I'll tell you what you can do, son. He said, go and get yourself a three-wheeler. I go, three-wheeler? He goes, yeah. So, well, why a three-wheeler? He said, because you can drive it on a motorcycle license. You don't need a car license. So I went down to my local motorcycle dealer and chatted with the guy, and he said, yeah, I got two in the garage. Come and have a look, he goes. And they're just like, it was a Reliant, and it was built just like a car, except it only had one wheel on the front. But I had a 4-cylinder car engine, all the brakes, the differential and everything, gearbox, everything just like a car. So, but it didn't have a heater. But I was out of the cold. But you still had to dress up to drive it anywhere, you know. So I got an hour's instruction about how to drive a car, and then Monday morning I was put on the main road and off I went.
Does it handle like a motorcycle?
No, it handles just like a car.
Oh, it does. So,
except in the ice. Because if you've got a little bit of an icy road and the road has got a camber to it, as most roads do, and you put your foot on the brakes, the front of the car dives into the edge of the road.
So the brakes are at the front?
Oh yeah, still got a bike. Yeah, they had two brakes. You know, brakes on the back wheel, brake on the front wheel.
Oh, okay. So you could, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a van, so I could get tools in there, you know.
Sure.
So it's great. So
it seems like a uniquely British vehicle.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. I mean, they're very British. They were very dangerous, because if you know anything about three-wheelers, Morgan, there's a car company in England called Morgan, and they made a three-wheeler that was a very fast car. I mean, some of their cars would do over 100 miles an hour, but their cars were built the right way. They had two wheels on the front and one in the back. And that's the way three-wheelers should be built if they're going to be safe. If you only put one wheel on the front, then if you go around a corner too fast, it'll tip over.
Right.
Reliant Robin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, no good.
So we're getting close to an hour. So before we pass our theoretic stopping point, I do want to ask you about 9/11, the day that you were carving at the White House. Is that correct?
I wasn't carving at the White House. I had just started back at the White House, and they wanted the columns by the Rose Garden. They wanted the columns replaced. Or they wanted them restored, put it that way. You weren't allowed to replace them. So I was there making patterns of the bases, taking detailed measurements of the columns, the base, the top, the bottom, the height, all this sort of thing. And what we were going to do was, depending how bad the columns were, see, over the years, what had happened was, because nobody ever gave the people time enough to do a proper job, they would use materials that would set fast. So a guy would start in the morning and he would use either cement to make a patch. He would use plaster. He would use all sorts of things to make a patch on these columns, and then they would paint them. So after they were painted, they looked like nothing had ever happened. Well, over the years, of course, they would start to fail, and big lumps would spoil off. That's when they called me in to try and do a proper job of all the columns. So what we did was we got DeVito Stone to turn columns the right length and diameter, and then cut them in half, and then we would carve out the inside, leaving 4 inches of stone on the outside of thickness of the column. So then we carve the column back to the thickness that would render the new pieces to go on, and then we encased the old part of the column with the new parts, and then graded everything in, and that's the way it was all done.
So you're doing that on 9/11?
9/11, all I was doing on 9/11 actually was cutting the patterns.
Okay.
Cutting the patterns, taking the details for the work that was to be done later. And I had a bag of tools there, which comprised of calipers, compasses, pencils, that sort of thing. And I kept the bag in the carpenter's shop, which was like underground. And every now and then I would sort of walk over to where my bag was to get more tools or put tools back. They also had a television in the foreman's office, and there was a lot of people in the doorway, and I couldn't get in to get the tools. And I said, "What the hell's going on? Let me in." And I looked up, and I saw all this smoke coming out of one of the tray towers, and I thought, what the hell's going on there? And he said, a plane just hit it. I thought, oh my God. And then right after that, after I picked up my tools and I was going out, I looked round at the television and this other plane came and hit. And I said something like, we've got a bit of a problem on our hands, don't we? So I walked outside back to where I was working on these columns, and I heard somebody shouting and screaming at the top of their voices, "Get off the lawn, there's a plane coming." And they were out there getting ready to set up, I believe, for something like a congressional party or something that day or that week or something, And there were people setting up picnic tables, and somebody said, "Get out, there's a plane coming." And so I ran back into the carpenter's shop, and that's when they told everybody in the White House to get out and go to Pennsylvania Avenue. So I basically strung along with the carpenters and some of the people from the pastry shop. And they just kept moving us back. That wasn't a very fun day, to say the least.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a place to be on that day in history.
Yeah. It just, I never planned it that way, but, you don't plan a lot of things, do you?
No. When were you allowed to go back to work there in that?
Oh, yeah, it was quite a while. I don't remember how many weeks it was, but it was a while before we could get back in. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. That was, wow.
Okay, well, this has been a great conversation, and I feel like we just scratched the surface. Because I'm looking at our notes, and I'm still wondering why Portland Cement is named after Portland. But maybe you'll come back and you'll answer some of these other questions.
Anytime you like.
Yeah, I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the last. I guess we've known each other tangentially for 20 more years, and every time that we talk, I am just delighted to hear your stories and your perspective.
Well, I hope we meet again, not too distant future.
Well, you got to come to one of those annual meetings.
That's right. That's right.
Well, now that he's got lifetime membership paid for.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, are you a lifetime member now?
I am indeed.
Wow, congratulations. I think they'll cancel that policy by the time I retire. It's going to be like Social Security. So are
all the money goes to the podcast, Matthew. Sorry.
Are you still an English citizen, or are you American?
I am.
Citizen. You're English.
I am English.
Okay. Yeah. Was that a decision that you made, or was that just something that never even came up?
Something I never really thought about. you're too busy. You're too busy doing other stuff. You know, you pay your taxes, you go and see your doctor, you brush your teeth, you get up in the morning and you go to work, you know?
Yeah, right. Who's got time for documents?
I don't know, maybe one day I will. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's a delight to hear your voice and to listen to your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Stone Carvers Guild Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and we hope that you will find us online at stonecarversguild.org. There you can find photos showing some of the things that we discussed today, additional information about our guest, and if you're so inclined, ways to get more involved with the Guild and our ongoing activities. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, we hope that you will subscribe and rate us on the podcaster of your choice. 5 stars, please. We'll be back in a month with a new episode, so until then, keep your hammer up and your chisel sharp.